Hi, I'm Zorte, and you probably don't know me, but I'm an Ultimate Iron Man with way too much free time on my hands. Equipped with 2K total, over a billion items, and an opinion that nobody really asked for, I'm here to share my old school thoughts with anyone who will listen. Ladies and gentlemen, we have made it to episode 3. First, a huge thank you for the reaction to my last video. It put such a huge smile on my face to read your comments, and the amount of support that people left me through leaving a like or subscribing completely blew me away. So, a heartfelt thank you to all of you. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. This will be pretty much podcast style like the previous two. But I will be showing some reference stuff on screen at some point, so I'll try to call out when that happens when I get there. PvP is in a rough spot, and it has been for a long time. I've never been into PvP, but I want everyone to be able to enjoy RuneScape, whether you play an Iron Man, you only PvM, you PK, or anything else. I want everyone to have fun. Even if you actively dislike running into PKers, which I totally get that, I think it's still good for the game to offer content for everyone. It just makes it more well-rounded and it helps grow the game. If nothing else, it makes for great YouTube content to watch. Today I'm going to be going over my suggestions for how to revitalize PvP in RuneScape. Now there's an important distinction here, which is that I'm talking about revitalizing PvP, not revitalizing the wilderness, okay? There is a difference there. And the first, or I guess second thing now that I want to emphasize is that there's not a perfect solution for this. If there was a perfect solution, then this problem would be fixed by now and we wouldn't have gone through 5 iterations of Jagex trying to rejuvenate PvP and not succeeding through wilderness updates and minigame updates. They've tried quite a bit at this point. And with that said, even if you're a PKer and you don't like the suggestions that I'm making today, I really hope that you can appreciate that non-PKers like myself are really trying to bring some ideas to the table for you and having a discussion about how to create some more PvP content for you so that you guys have something fun to engage in. So my idea today has 3 parts to it. So if you'd be so kind, kind of wait until you hear all 3 of the pieces, keep an open mind, and then let me know what you think at the end, and I'd like to have a discussion with you guys. Okay, here's the situation we're in. Only like 5% of the community engages in PvP content. What that means is that anytime Jagex makes a PvP update, they're still having to play to the majority, which doesn't like PvP or might even dislike PKers. Even if you poll PvP questions to PKers only, you're still running into an issue where Jagex is never going to implement changes that are going to piss off 95% of their player base. That's why I don't think we'll ever see best skilling XP rates or GP per hour come from the wilderness, which personally I think that's good anyway and not really the way to solve the PvP problem. Keep in mind that Jagex has to balance PvP updates against gold farming too. So when they've tried things in the past like super high gold rate revs or Bounty Hunter 1 or Bounty Hunter 2, those have all been abused in some way, and we really need to try something completely new and think outside of the box. With that said, I think the first thing that we do is revitalize Deadman servers. Now, I'm not talking about the typical Deadman servers or the permanent 345 server. The 345 server is a super cool place for PKers to interact, but it's been around for years now and it's never been reset. So what we've ended up with is a small amount of max players left on the server who absolutely steamroll through any new players. They're not really having fun because the server's dead and nobody wants to play 345 because you're at such a stupid disadvantage when you're starting for the first time. You're pretty much guaranteed to fail. So what do? Well, I think we let the 345 guys keep their server. I mean, they were promised a permanent server and they've invested so much time in it that I think they should be able to keep it. If they want to continue playing it, I say let them, but what I'm suggesting is let's introduce rotating, resetting Deadman servers. These rotating resetting Deadman servers would be the same as World 345, but they would completely reset every 6 or 12 months. This would ensure that nobody gets too crazy far ahead, or at least someone would have the option of waiting until the reset to start playing at the same time as everyone else. Ideally, you'd have half of the servers reset every 12 months, where, well, what I'm trying to say is like half of them reset in July and half reset in January. That way, if you're 4 months into the year and you feel like it's not really worth starting right now, you'd only have to wait a couple months for 50% of the servers to reset instead of waiting for the entire rest of the year for the servers to reset. I also think you sprinkle in a couple of, or not even a couple, you sprinkle in a bunch of quests pre-completed in there so people don't have to recomplete quests for the 40th time at this point, and that would probably help entice people onto the servers for the first time anyway. With those server resets, you also get to enjoy all levels of PKing as the server progresses, so you get the early, mid, late, and maybe even maxed PKing all up until the server finally wipes at the end. And then on top of that, I say maybe you take the top X players, whatever that number is, and give them free entry into the finals of the next Deadman or PvP event that Jagex puts on. That sort of a reward for all of the grinding they put into to these new rotating servers carries over to something. And I feel like letting them skip the grinding of those next big PvP events and kind of go right to the end of whatever the tournament is a good way to reward that. And by the way, Jagex could implement this tomorrow. They already have server for 345, and I don't think it would take much engine work or dev time to enable this. Moving on to part 2, which feeds into part 1, LMS is in a really rough spot right now too. It's basically overrun with bots. It's really easy for the bots to game it, and I don't think it's nearly as fun or as exciting as it could be. So I'm going to bring up a graphic here, which is the league's Trailblazer map. So with this league, we got the engine work to be able to break up the RuneScape map into the Torontoan, Kandarin, Fremnik, Asgarnian, Karamja, Misthalin, Wilderness, Desert, Zaya, and Mauritania regions. When we take LMS, I think that we split it up into an hourly server and span that over a battle royale that takes place over all of the RuneScape areas. What I'm imagining is like every 5 or 10 minutes, one of those regions that I mentioned closes and it pushes everyone into the remaining areas. So if you start with, say, 250 players, obviously you won't run into too many people at the start, but then as areas close, you'll see more and more players to interact with until eventually you end up just like in a subset of the final area and you're forced to fight, very much like the current LMS minigame is today. But I think it'd be a lot cooler to have that full world experience. It would make it a lot more engaging. It would make it harder to program bots. And overall, I think it makes it more engaging content. You could really randomize this a lot to keep it fresh too. So sometimes the game starts and maybe you have max stats, but sometimes you spawn as a pure. Sometimes you start with all quests unlocked, and sometimes you can't access any quest areas. Sometimes you start with a PK basic kit, and sometimes you start with nothing. So essentially, you're spending an hour collecting items, having run-ins with other players, and trying to gather the best resources that you can for the final fight. You could really apply a lot of variation to this to keep it, a new and exciting experience as well. It does kind of beg the question, like, what do you do about bots and gold farmers? Well, first of all, I think the increased scale and variation would make it way harder to code effective bots compared to something like LMS, since LMS is a very small area and it's very predictable. It's easy to solve from a programming perspective. For this new version, you'd get reward points for each PK, for placement, victory, or however Jagex wants to structure it. And then as you collect those points for doing well in the minigame, the important thing here is you can only use those points on the reset Deadman servers from part 1 of my proposal. And when you spend those points, you get the option to buy resources, PK gear, maybe special weapons and armor. It could really be anything. And that way, you won't affect the main game at all. So there's no reason that people should be against this. Like, you might be able to say, well, what if people farm the minigame like crazy and then they redeem their rewards on the reset servers and then they swap the GP? Even if someone had bots running and was farming this like crazy, the supply would be so high and the demand so low for GP on the reset servers because, let's be honest, there probably wouldn't be that many people playing them anyway, since only like 5% of the RuneScape player base engages in PvP. So again, it wouldn't affect the main game economy hardly at all. Now what we have is a set of reset Deadman servers to play. You can switch it up with some large-scale whole RuneScape map battle royale gameplay. You can use those rewards from that minigame to fund your reset server experience, and a good performance on the reset servers could earn you an instant ticket to a late phase of one of the next Jagex PvP events. And once again, on top of that stuff, the engine code for regions and the BR gameplay already exists. Converting points from a temporary server to another server already exists. They do this when you convert your league points to the main game to use in the league shop. So while this would take some dev time, the infrastructure is already there. I think the reset rotating Deadman servers could be done with almost zero work. The mini game would obviously take a decent amount of development, but the regions, like I said, already exist. LMS already exists, so you could leverage that infrastructure. So I don't think you're looking at a colossal development effort on either of these points. All right, that brings me to part 3 of my idea, which has to do with game modes. I'm pretty sure pretty much everyone is familiar with PvP Hardcore Iron Man, thanks to C Engineer and some other YouTubers. I think it would be really cool to make an official PvP Hardcore Iron Man and PvP Ultimate Iron Man game mode. Jagex, or Ash specifically, has publicly said that it would take almost no work to enable that as well, so that's something that could be done basically right away. These new modes would bring some main game content for PvPers to play, and it has the added bonus of revitalizing the PvP worlds. So you have the new Hardcore and Ultimate Iron Man, you have the players trying to hunt the Hardcores in the Ultimate Iron Man, and then you also have the PKers that go after the hunters. It introduces a whole new food chain to the PvP worlds. If you were willing to spend a little bit more development time on it, it would be really cool if players could put a bounty on their own heads, so that if you're a PKer and you manage to PK a Hardcore or Ultimate Iron Man, you get whatever bounty they have put on their own heads, which kind of falls in line with how a lot of the YouTubers have done their series historically. And then perhaps you'll also throw in a cool cosmetic trophy that shows off how many PvP Hardcore Iron Man or Ultimate Iron Man you've PK'd as well. Plus, that's, again, some really cool content that everyone gets to watch and enjoy. So let's recap. I'm proposing rotating Deadman servers that reset regularly. The top prize for the top players at the end of that server lifecycle would be the ability to skip to a late phase of the next Jagex PvP event. So like skipping the qualification for the Deadman mode tournament, or getting to go straight into the quarterfinals of a 1v1 event, something like that. And then next I'm proposing a rework of the LMS minigame, which would turn into a full RuneScape map battle royale, and it would use the League's region system that's already in place. The rewards for this minigame could only be spent on the Deadman reset servers, and that way we would have minimal effect on the main game. And then finally, introducing PvP game modes for PvP only Hardcore and Ultimate Iron Man, which would increase activity on the PvP worlds and also provide some really interesting content. At the beginning of the video, I said I don't think Jagex will ever introduce best GP per hour rates or XP per hour rates into the wilderness. 95% of the RuneScape player base is not interested in engaging in PvP content, and doing either of those things would frustrate the player base. So from just a business perspective, I don't see how it would make sense for Jagex to ever even pull that to PKers. So I'm trying to think of new ideas that we could revitalize PvP without focusing too heavily on the wilderness. We've already tried the wilderness rejuvenation changes. We've tried bounty hunter variations, and I think that focusing on that piece of content moving forward is not the way to go. And even if you don't like my ideas, I really hope that you can appreciate the fact that I'm trying to think outside the box here and brainstorm some ideas to revitalize PvP. I just want everyone to be able to have fun on Old School no matter what content you engage in. If you made it this far, please consider leaving a like or a subscription. And at the end of the day, it's just more YouTube content for you. You can always change your mind later. But again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.